So you can type 2, turn to John chapter 10. And while you're doing that, if you're new, let me kind of tell you what we've been doing. We've been walking through a book in the New Testament. There's a book in the New Testament called John. And you go, well, why is it called John? Because a guy named John wrote it. And John was one of Jesus' 3 best friends. And after Jesus died and rose from the dead and went back to heaven, John wrote a book about his best friend. It's really amazing. And in it is the life and the ministry and the teaching of Jesus Christ. And so what we've been looking at, and what we've been really asking the question is, what did Jesus Christ have to say about himself? It's like, I kind of care what a college professor thinks, or it's interesting to hear what the History Channel has to say around Easter or Christmas or whatever. But we're like, well, let's let Jesus Christ speak for himself about himself. And here's what he's been doing. He's been speaking very clearly. This is why Jesus is a very controversial person. People who say, I have neutral feelings about Jesus and never really looked at his life or studied his legacy or listened to his teaching, because he makes statements about himself that mean something about you. So every time Jesus says something about himself, he's talking about you as well, what it means for you. So let me give you an example. A couple weeks ago, Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. We're like, oh, that's nice. Here's what that means. You are spiritually hungry. You are a spiritually hungry person, that you have physical appetites that you're very aware of. Like, I know my physical appetites. Sleeping, and food, and sex, I have those appetites. Well, you have spiritual appetites as well. And then Jesus says later, I'm the light of the world. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a sweet statement. What he's saying is you're walking in darkness. And then what you need is you need light, you need direction, you need life. And then last week Jesus says, I am the door, which means you're on the outside, but you can come inside. And it's kind of this idea of separation and invitation. We talk about that. And then this week we're going to talk about maybe one of his most famous, where he says, I am the good shepherd. And this is interesting because this is the humility of Jesus. See, in Jesus there's always the humility and humanity, and then the divinity of Jesus, and they're together. So think about this. Jesus last week compared himself to a piece of wood. He said, I'm a door. I'm like the most basic thing you've ever walked through. And then he's saying, hey, I want to talk to you about how I lead my people. It's like a shepherd, which a shepherd is like one of the hardest jobs you could have had. Like a shepherd is, you know that show back in the day, Dirty Jobs? I think that was what it was called. And it's like the worst. I was reading about it this week, and he said in there, the 2 worst jobs he ever had was he had to test a shark suit. That sounds like a terrible job. And he was a sewer inspector. You just think about these hard jobs. And it was a respected job, but it was a blue-collar job. It wasn't a great-paying job. It wasn't really, job's not the right word. It was more of like a lifestyle. There was no clocking in and clocking out when you're a shepherd. Maybe think about the worst job I've ever had. I've had several jobs, believe it or not. The worst job that I've ever had, I graduated from high school, went to college. Freshman year of college, my dad, I'm coming home from Pittsburgh, and my dad says, I got a great job for you. I said, this is great. He says, it's actually going to pay really well. He said, this was 2003. This is 15 years ago. He said, pays $10 an hour. This sounds great. He said, yeah, it's one of my clients. My dad's in financial services. He said, it's one of my clients, and you'll like her, and she's really nice. So I meet with her, and she's like, well, it's 4 p.m. to midnight, 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. It's like, it's second shift, okay. And then she said, and there's just, you want to bring a sweatshirt and a hat because you'll be working in a fridge the whole time. Oh, it was hard. It was so hard. But basically what I did was I packed up these crates. I packed up these crates, and then we put them on for the third shift truck drivers to take throughout the night. And it was just one of those things. I respected the men who did it, and I built some friendships, but I just realized that's a hard job. Well, this idea of shepherd is not just a hard job. You have to understand it. It was one of the main understandings of how God was in the Old Testament. So your favorite psalm, or if you know maybe just one psalm, you probably know the Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23. Some of the most famous people, think about Abel. Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Well, the first guy that we're ever told has a job in the Bible is Abel. And Abel, we're told, was a shepherd. And then when God looks for like a king in the future, he looks for David, and David is a shepherd boy who becomes a king. And so this theme goes on and on and on. And then what's really interesting, and I can't get into it right now for sake of time, but it'd be a great thing to talk with your DNA group about, or your community group about, is to look at Ezekiel 34. You maybe use that. I never even read Ezekiel. Is that in the Bible? It is. And Ezekiel 34 is this interesting chapter where he's confronting what we'd say is the church leaders of that day. He was confronting the religious leaders of the day, and he said, you're supposed to shepherd my people. He said, but you're selfish shepherds. He says, you're a selfish shepherd. You're supposed to feed them, but you're feeding yourself. And when one of them goes away, you don't go after it. One of them gets ill or injured, you don't take care of them. And instead, you take care of yourself, and you don't take care of your sheep. And then he says this statement. It's in Ezekiel 34, verse 15. He says, because you didn't do this, I will be a shepherd to my people. And then he says, I'm going to go after them. I'm going to find them. I'm going to take them back. And so I wanted you to understand all that because when we turn to John 10, which I guess hopefully by now you found it, John 10 verse 11, you have to have kind of some of this background to make sense of this verse. Look with me at John 10, chapter 10, verse 11. Jesus says this, I am the good shepherd. Not just any shepherd, we'll get to that. I'm a good shepherd. I'm a noble shepherd. I'm a trustworthy shepherd. I'm a shepherd who's committed to your good. He says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. We're going to talk about 6 things with the time that we have over the next 2 hours. Okay, we're going to talk about 6 different things. 6 different realities about being Jesus being our shepherd and us being his sheep. So let's talk about it. First, I want you to understand this, and we said this last week, and it's because you go, Kyle, you repeat yourself a lot. Well, speaking to the same people every week, I'm sorry. But the reason I repeat myself a lot is because Scripture brings up the same themes again and again and again. One of the main themes is this, that Jesus is the shepherd and that we're the sheep. There's a lot of ways that God talks about himself. I'm like a father to sons and daughters. I'm a husband to a wife. I'm a master to servants. But one of the most common is he says, I'm a shepherd of the sheep. And here's the main idea. The main idea is that you were created to follow. And we all know this. This is why you follow people on Facebook and on Instagram and on a bunch of other social media platforms I don't fully understand. Okay, we were just created to follow. It's like the same reason. If you ever go to the grocery store and you look next to you and you see these magazines, and I'm not judging you if you bought those magazines before, but just you see these magazines, and you read the front cover and you go, so-and-so's dating so-and-so, who cares? And then you read the other cover, so-and-so's not dating so-and-so anymore, who cares? Oh, so-and-so's having a baby, so-and-so's not getting divorced, or whatever. It's like, I believe the reason that we're interested in that stuff is because we were created to follow. And what we've always wanted to do is follow people who we thought were better than us. So, well, why do you watch sports? You ever think about that? It's kind of a strange thing. You're really watching jerseys play, because the people on the teams change every year. It's like, you root for a jersey. It's like, well, that's good. But why do you do it? Well, it's because, you love to follow and watch people who are like, I wish I could play football like that. I wish I could play football. There's something, maybe you've never been able to articulate it. That's why people watch sports. It's like, you would never want to watch sports if they were as good as you. You're like, this is boring, right? And so it's like you were created to follow. It's like why we listen to podcasts. It's why we listen to YouTube channels. It's why people, they don't like their house, so they watch Chip and Joanna games, and they want to follow that. It's like there's this. Recently, I heard about maybe some of you don't know about this. There's a family. There's probably many families like this. There's a family on Instagram called Bucket List Family. And I found out about this people, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. They get paid to take vacations. And other people pay it, and they have all these beautiful pictures, and we start following them, and some people think they could be like that. Like, oh, maybe I can take vacations for free, and then you try it, and you have like 12 likes on your page. Like, no, yeah. But it's like this whole idea that we were created to follow, and this is also, you think about it, why is particularly, and I talk about the millennial generation a lot, but just younger generations, what they're saying is that a lot of the younger generation, when it looks for jobs, one of the main things it looks for, and especially as we live in a fatherless generation, is they look for mentors. It's like I might choose a job that allows me to make $10,000 or $15,000 less a year if I knew that maybe I could be developed. Maybe there was someone there who cared about me. Maybe there was someone there who was going to develop my skill set. And so this whole idea that we're meant to follow, it's and let me say this, oftentimes I think the reason that we get frustrated with God is we're trying to have Him follow us. It's like, we think we're the shepherd, He's the sheep, and most times when I hear people complain about God, about something, it's usually, I really want to get into this medical school and God just didn't make it happen. So, well, God doesn't, we be compassionate, but God doesn't follow you. Or I want to date this non-Christian guy. Sometimes like I want to explicitly do something that I shouldn't be doing. I'd like to use my body this way. So God's like, I'm not following you there. And so it's this kind of idea, and here's the other thing. So not only do we not follow, sometimes we're, one of the things about sheep I didn't tell you last week, I want to save some things for this week, is that sheep are incredibly stubborn. So last week we said, sorry, bad news, they were stupid. This week they're stubborn, okay? And here's what would happen, and this is why I think we like to keep things simple here, never shallow, because we think those are two different things. We like to keep things really, really simple, but think about it this way. If Christianity, the definition of being a Christian is following Jesus and helping others, following Jesus, that's a good definition, because Jesus says follow me. Then you think, okay, if sheep are stubborn, that means they often go places God's not leading them. That's what sin is. Sin literally means to miss the mark. That's the Greek word. It literally means to miss the mark. What does it mean? It means I'm going somewhere God's not leading me. That's sin. And so what is repentance? Turning around. It's like, wow, Christianity just became very simple, very hard. But that's what Christianity is. Christianity is I follow Jesus. When I'm sinning, I'm not following Jesus. And all I need to do is turn around and follow him again. And that's the next 50 years of your life. And that's kind of what Christianity is. And what they say is sheep are really stubborn. And so a sheep will get stuck between two rocks, going in the wrong direction, not following the shepherd. And instead of turning around, we'll keep going. And most problems in our lives become more complex and more comprehensive because we don't turn around. This is so true, I'm just telling you. One of the things, I was recently listening to a psychologist, not a Christian psychologist, but he was talking about, he does a lot of counseling, and he said, I was watching an interview with him, he said, I've been counseling people constantly for 35 years. He said, it's terrifying because what I realized in 35 years is nobody gets away with anything. It's like something worth thinking about for like a year, It's like nobody gets away with anything. He said, all it does is it just accrues. And sometimes we're wrestling with something in someone's life, and it's like, well, what is this? This is about your dad from 7 years ago that you never dealt with. And if you don't deal with things, all they do is, if you don't turn around, I heard Paul David Tripp. By the way, Paul David Tripp's just to Google that name and read anything he's ever written. He's a great counselor guy. He said that almost any time, and he's a big-time counselor, to get in his office and get a meeting with him is probably hard, and my guess would be expensive. And he says, by the time it has to get to his plate, and he's dealing with some marriage issue, or he's dealing with some family issue, he said 9 out of 10 times the issue could have been handled very simply with a few friends if it had been dealt with right away. It's like, a little bit of, most times people tell me the issues in the marriage, I'm like, don't be afraid, very normal, all of them. Bitterness, anger, dealing with roles and responsibility, sex, communication, whatever, you can find. What's the worst thing you could do, though, is not to talk about them. Never to get help with them. Never to change. It's like, well, you struggle with bitterness. Not a big deal, we can deal with it. But it's more difficult if you're bitter for 20 years. And you become a relational archaeologist, you've got all these memories, and you get it. So the very simple thing is, Jesus is our shepherd, we're sheep. The second thing is, Jesus is a good shepherd, and we are sheep that are known and loved. I want you to see this in verses 14 and 15. In verses 14 and 15, this is what Jesus says. I am the good shepherd. He wants to define himself. So, let's read on. He says, I'm a good shepherd, and then he defines what it means for him to be good. It's always helpful to look at the context. Well, why are you the good shepherd? Well, two things. I know my sheep, and I own my sheep. So we tend to take care of things that we own. Like, I doubt any of you ever, rented a car and got a car wash. Took us to a car wash, right? They'll do that with cars we rent. Probably if you're renting an apartment, you didn't, fully gut the kitchen. It's like, well, you're renting. You don't own it. Makes sense. Jesus is saying, I own you, so I'm going to take care of you. And then he says, I know you. He says, I know my own, and they know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Here's what Jesus is saying, and this is, I think this is the battle of Christians. Those of us, I know not everyone here is Christian, but those of us who would say, hey, I'm a Christian. I think, and I've had people say this to me, versions of this, that the great fight of being a Christian is not believing that Jesus is God. It's like you believe the resurrection, you see the evidence, you see the life, you see the ministry. Functionally, practically, day-to-day, it's the belief, is God good? Is God good? Especially when life is hard and there's a lot of difficulties in my life. And Jesus is telling us, I'm good, and you've got to trust me. I own you, so I'm going to take care of you. And I personally know you. This word know is the same word. It's a very deep word in the Bible. Knowing, it means not just information, but intimate knowledge. Intimately known. It's like it said about Adam knew his wife and she conceived. Well, that's very deep knowing. That's very intimate knowing. That's very personal knowing. And it's what it's saying is, God knows us, and this is what's so powerful. God knows us, so God goes after us. Last week, afterwards, a lady came up to me and she said she was visiting, a lady and a husband, they were visiting their son or daughter here. And they said, I always ask the question, tell me, what you learned today, or what did you enjoy about church and church service? She said, just thank you for the reminder that God pursues us. Mm-hmm. So, the good news, we said turn around, that's the main message of Christianity, repentance. But the other thing is that God pursues us, and this is very much what shepherds did, they pursued their sheep. You may have heard the famous thing where Jesus says, I've left the 99 and I'm going to go after the one. Well, here's kind of and let me just be real with everyone for a moment. One of the things about shepherds, and this was really interesting to me, is that if a sheep runs away from him one time, he'll pull the sheep in and talk to him. and warn him and kind of be stern and say his name and put him back where he needs to be. And if it happens a second time or a third time, he'll do that as well. Eventually, if the sheep continues to not listen to his voice and go in the wrong direction, he grabs that sheep, picks it up, and breaks one of its legs. You're like, have you ever seen the picture of the sheep on the shoulders of the shepherd? And you're like, that's cute? No, the sheep's leg is broken. That's actually what happens. And what the shepherd would do is the shepherd would say, you're wandering from me, I'm going to break your leg. I'm going to break that relationship. Whatever it is in your life, I'm going to break that. And then when it's broken, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you back on my shoulders and you're going to learn my voice again. Because we wander for a lot of different reasons. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of stories. It's like, well, I went to college and so I was, kind of did my own thing. I wandered away, I followed somebody else, didn't listen to the shepherd. Moved to a big city, started making money, got married, was in a wrong romantic relationship. It's like, well, those are all wanderings, and God will often break you. I had somebody after the last service. You guys are lucky you get to hear all the stories of the in-between services here. I had somebody at the last service, and he literally pulled me aside and said, hey, I need to show you something from the sermon. And I said, okay. And he put his foot up on one of the steps and started to pull his pants leg up. I said, what are we doing here? And he pointed on his leg to this massive scar. And he said, this is where literally God broke me. It was this accident in my life that I knew I was going in the total wrong direction. And I know without a shadow of doubt that God let this happen in my life because then it put me in the hospital and it broke me up, and wow. And that's kind of the picture. So Jesus says, I'm a good shepherd. And Jesus says, I know you and I'm going to take care of you. And then thirdly, he says something that is really the most important thing of all that he says. And it's found in verse 11. He says this, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd, and he's going to tell us what the primary, fundamental, essential, foundational, however many other words I can use, thing he does is, he says, I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd does one main thing. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. So, we just want to be really clear about this because there's a lot of people who, I'm thinking of no one in particular, but there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of even buildings that say church on them and have a steeple that do not understand the main reason Jesus Christ came. Jesus Christ did not primarily come to teach. Jesus Christ did not primarily come to die as an example. It's interesting, we had a lady, probably a couple months ago now, who visited our church, and afterwards I was talking to her, and she said, you know what, she was not a Christian, a very, very kind of spiritually religious person. She said, I just learned so much from the cross. I just learned that Jesus teaches us we can be calm in suffering. Even when it's horrific suffering, there's just a beauty in his calmness in dying. And I just kind of had to explain, yes, there's a couple verses in the Bible that talk about Jesus as an example of suffering. But the primary message of the Bible is that Jesus Christ did not die as an example. He did not die for some kind of cause. He died for people.
That's right.
The Bible says, if you read it, it says this, that he's going to lay his life down for his sheep. Who are the sheep? Every person who would ever believe in him. The main message of Christianity is that Jesus Christ dies for sinners. Which you've got to understand, this is the one part of, if somebody's learning about shepherds and going, yeah, I've seen a shepherd do that. This is the one thing shepherds didn't do. Shepherds fed their sheep, and shepherds led their sheep, and shepherds went after wandering sheep, but shepherds never gave their life for the sheep. It did not happen. Because if you do that, well then who defends the sheep anyway? It's only the resurrection that makes Jesus, be able to die and still lead his sheep. And so it's the main thing here is that Jesus Christ dies in our place. If you say, what would be, if it's possible to sum up all of Christianity in one word, what would it be? It would probably be the word substitution. That Jesus Christ substitutes himself for us. It's what, I want to show you this. Look at verses 17 and 18. In verses 17 and 18 it says this. For this reason, Jesus is just continuing to talk about what he's doing. For this reason the Father loves me. God the Father loves Jesus Christ, and especially his complete obedience to the will of God. And he says this, for this reason the Father loves me because I lay down my life. That's the second time he's going to say it. that I may take it up again. Here's what's interesting. Jesus never mentions his death apart from his resurrection. He says that. Then he says this, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down. Jesus Christ gave himself willingly. He didn't have to, he wanted to. This is what's so powerful. If you understand that there was nothing that compelled him that he absolutely had to, nothing outside of him could make him do it, it was inside of him that he wanted to do it. And this is what he says. He says, I have authority to lay it down. That's the fourth time in the passage he's going to talk about giving his life for his sheep. And I have the authority to take it up again. This charge I received from my Father. He's talking about, it's what theologians, if you want some theological language, it's what theologians call the active and passive obedience of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ, it's not talked about enough probably, but he lived a perfect life. That's called his active obedience. 33 years of never sinning, 33 years of not breaking God's law, 33 years of perfect obedience. That's his active obedience, or what would be called his active righteousness. Then there's this passive righteousness. And his passive righteousness is the giving of himself for sinners. And this is so foundational. This is at the very heart of Christianity. And here's what it accomplished. I want you to see what it accomplished. Verse 16. Why, Jesus, why did you give your life? Well, for the sheep. Well, why? Here's what he says. And I have other sheep that I've died for, that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. I want us to look at verse 16 just for a moment together. And if we're going to understand this, it's important to understand the difference between, we'll talk about shepherding for a moment here, the difference between a flock and a fold. And this will kind of help you understand Christianity and why there are many churches and why there are different denominations and why there are parachurch ministries. It's because Jesus said, I died for one flock. That would be like, just to say there was 100 sheep. That would be a flock of sheep. Well, the flock of sheep would, if a shepherd owned a flock of sheep of 100, they might be in different folds of 10. It's like a sheep pen almost. Think of it that way. It's like, hey, these 20 sheep are going to be over here, and these 20 sheep are over here, and these 20 sheep are over here, and they're all one flock, but they're in different folds. And this becomes incredibly important because it explains Christianity. It says Jesus Christ died for one flock that now has many folds. So you think about it, in Winston-Salem there is one flock with many folds. There's one flock that, if you'd say, well, how many churches are there in Winston? There's two answers. You could say, you could give the flock answer or the fold answer. The flock answer is there's one flock. The fold answer is there's 515 folds roughly. That's what they say. And this is really important. This is one of the reasons why we talk a lot here about collaboration, not competition with other churches. It's like we don't compete. We're all the same flock. In fact, we're going to try to reach 185,000 lost people in our city. That's our heart. That's our desire. I mean, it's just common sense. We look around the room. It doesn't matter how many. We couldn't run enough services. Even if we ran 4 services every day, you couldn't fit it in. It's like, because it's not about come and see. It's about go and tell them. It's about a need to plant more churches and reach more people and collaborate with more churches. And so this is what Jesus is saying. He said, I died for one flock. But then he said this, and this is important. You need your own fold. It's like, that's another part of it. It's like, well, if I'm going to be a sheep and I'm going to follow him, I need people to walk with. And what is a fold? It's other sheep that you live in close quarters with. It's other sheep that know you, that have the same shepherd. It doesn't have to be at 2 cities. There are other folds we recommend. But we'd say if you're going to come here, be part of the fold. Part of what that means is a community group. We talk about that a lot because here's what you need. You need, in a fold, people that genuinely know you. Because let's be honest, we're kind of complex. It's easy to hide. There's many dimensions to us. It's like to you, there's a financial dimension, and a sexual dimension, and a relational dimension, and a spiritual dimension, and a career dimension. And I remember I had a buddy, he told me, he said, he was looking in hindsight, realizing he did the wrong thing. He said, you know what I did? He said, I started making a lot of money. That's not wrong. But he said, here's what I did. He said, I started making a lot of money, and I wanted to spend a lot of it on myself. But I knew if I talked to one group of people about all the things I wanted to do, they would tell me no. He said, so what I did is I went over to one group of Christian friends and I said, what do you think about us redoing the kitchen? And here's why. Oh, that sounds great. Of course, that sounds reasonable. I mean, that kitchen, And then he said, then I went over to another group of friends and I said, what do you think about me redoing our den? And then he said, and I went to another third group and I said, what do you think about me buying a brand new car? And there's nothing wrong necessarily doing all 3 of those things at the same time, but for him, he knew it wasn't the right thing. His conscience had condemned him. But he was like, you know what, but if nobody knows, if you only know this dimension of my life, and you only know this dimension of my life, or it's like you ask about something, and it's like, well, if I know how your marriage is, the answer is probably no. Or I know that you travel way too much already, and you don't see your kids enough, so the answer is no. Or maybe I can be more gracious. I see it all, and I understand it. I see how busy your life is, and I see how crazy it is, and so your lack of attendance is explainable and understandable and temporary. And you get what I'm saying? So we just got to know each other. That's why you need the fold. And this is why the family is the first fold, by the way. You know, the cool thing about our church is we got so many young couples and young marrieds and young singles and young with their pregnant with their first and pregnant with their second. And so you just begin to say, I'm going to build a family. And one of the things you got to realize when we're committed to here is the family is the first fold, and every parent is a pastor. And so it's just like, you know, this is what we want to see. We want to see every family say, okay, the center of discipleship, the center of mission, the center of evangelism is the home. And really, we're hypocritical if we do it everywhere else and then don't do it in our home. This is why our kids ministry, we say this really loud and clear. We have kids in the building next door. Those of you who don't have kids may not know that. And we do that during all 4 services. And one of our desires is to say, hey, we want to partner with parents to raise a generation of Christ. We don't actually believe we can replace parents. We just want to resource them. And so this is what Jesus died for. He died for one flock that would have many folds. And then I want us to see one other thing here. I want us to see how Jesus is the chief shepherd, and we point other sheep to him. So this is interesting. He's called the good shepherd in John 10, and then he's called the chief shepherd in 1 Peter 5. I want to read this passage to you. 1 Peter 5 says this: shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight. So the shepherd, by the way, even the word pastor literally means a shepherd. That's what pastor means. He's saying here, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. There's that language again. And then he says this: basically, you do all of this, and when the chief shepherd appears, that's Jesus Christ. By the way, it's interesting. He's called the good shepherd when he dies, and the chief shepherd when he returns. He says, you will receive an unfading crown. Here's what he's saying, that Jesus Christ is going to come back, and he's the chief shepherd. And in the meantime, all the sheep need to help each other. And there's 4 main ways, and I want to get real practical kind of as we begin to wrap things up a little bit here. I want to get real practical. What does it look like for us as sheep to live together? And to kind of, in one sense, care for, under-shepherd, shepherd each other, and point each other to the chief shepherd. There's 4 words we use here again and again and again. It's lead, feed, know, and protect. And those are shepherding words. Those are literally the 4 main things every shepherd always did. Lead, feed, know, and protect. And whenever I think about my job description, that's basically it. Whenever I think about what do community group leaders do for their community groups, that's basically it. We have a coaching system that oversees and cares for our community group leaders, and what they do, that's basically it. Lead, feed, know, and protect. So I want to talk about this because it doesn't matter how you do it in any structures here. What it matters is it's a great thing for all of your relationships, for your marriages, for your families. I think this is what good parents do with their kids. So let me just talk about each one of these briefly. One is lead. So what does it mean to lead? Well, you lead 2 ways. You lead by personal example, and you lead by vision. There's nothing more compelling to your friends and to your neighbors and to your family than a life that's genuinely following Jesus Christ. If you actually genuinely, like really did, like said, I'm going to follow Jesus, I'm going to help others find and follow Jesus. And when I'm realizing I'm going the wrong way, I'm going to turn around. If you began to do that, your life would become so compelling. I really believe that. Your life would become so compelling. It would be the argument. It's like, yeah, other people have other arguments. Yeah, I know that's what you think about Jesus, but actually, I want you to see that he's changing, he's transforming my life. And this is what we need. We need to see more. So much in life is caught, right? Not taught. We need personal examples of what does a marriage that's submitted to Jesus Christ look like. We need personal examples of how do you be a doctor and live for Jesus Christ. So we need some examples. That's what everybody needs. Well, how do you be a mom or dad? How do you follow Jesus Christ in maybe years of singleness, longer than you may have thought? It's like, well, what do we need? Well, I can give you Bible verses. They're really helpful, but it's also nice when you have a personal example. Vision is this idea that I'm trying to help you think through your next step and your first step. Your first step and your next step. This is why we talk about following Jesus all the time, right? It's simple. If you're walking with God, if you're following Jesus, it's the idea of what is my first step and what is my next step. And this is how we need to begin to think for each other and how we need to think for ourselves. I mean, a great question to ask is, why is, or where is this person? So maybe there's someone in your community group, or you can start with yourself. Where is this person at in whatever area it is? And then ask a deeper question, which is, why is this person here? You just begin to think, like, why does she always date the wrong guys? Why do I always date the wrong guys? Why do I keep doing, it's like you begin to ask the question, why do I do these things? And then you begin to say, well, what would God like it to look like in my life? And that's, you can look at Scripture and find that. And then you think, well, what would be my next step? What would be my first step? And here's the honest truth about first steps and next steps. It's always, your next step is always your hardest step. Always. It's like, that's why you haven't taken it. And this is why you need other people. It's like, if you would have handled your porn problem, if you could have done it alone, you would have by now. It's like, but you can't, so what you need other parts of the flock that are really part of the fold that can help you take your next step and help you turn around, and that's what Christianity is. Second thing is feeding each other, and that's just open Bible, open life. We talk about that all the time here. That's just, and everybody can learn something from somebody here. I learned things from my kids during our devotions. I mean, that you can learn things from any person at any age, at any stage of their Christian life. This is why the Bible is so central to everything we do. Because we believe our job is to not give you my advice, what does Kyle think about something, but what has God said about something. Third is lead, feed, know. And we talked about this, but it's just the ability to really know people. We're complex, we're multidimensional. And what I mean by that is, like I said earlier, you've got a financial aspect to you, and you've got a marital aspect to you, and then you have your career, and then your spouse has their career, and then there's that relationship, and there's your financial relationship, and then there's your relationship with your biological, your family, and then there's a relationship with your kids. It's like, well, how does that all intersect? It's like, I don't know. It's really, really hard. But as we get to know each other, that's why community groups are so important, that's why DNA groups are so important, then we can help apply, because we're resistant to apply God's Word to ourselves. We need each other to kind of help each other. Finally, and I want to spend a little moment on this, is protecting one another. This is probably the one that Christians don't think about enough. We're like, yeah, we probably should encourage each other, and we probably should feed each other God's Word, and it would also really be nice if we knew each other. I want to be in community, I want to be known. And by the way, let me just say this about being known. That they said that the average person, that I was reading this book called The Lonely American. And in The Lonely American, there is this couple. Have I told the story in the service already? I'm having one of those moments. I'm like, did I tell this already? I told this 3 times today. Sorry guys, one of those moments. There was this book that's written called The Lonely American. I'm starting to tell it going, I told her. I didn't. The Lonely American. Anyway, stay with me for a second. The Lonely American. There was this interesting thing where they were talking about how the average person, this was a married couple, they were they're counselors together, they're not Christians. They said that they have all these people coming up and wanting to meet with them, and the people think they're depressed. And so they meet with this couple and they say, I think I'm depressed. Depression is a real thing and many people deal with it. And they said, it's amazing, the majority of the time they meet people, they go, you're not depressed, you're lonely. You think you're depressed, you actually just don't have meaningful relationships in your life. There's a phrase now that's used by Americans called alone together, which is the way to describe a lot of the generation that's connected over social media, but not connected really to one another. Okay, so to protecting each other, how do we protect each other? Well, it's really what I want to, just let me say it simply, it's the ministry of warning one another. That's right. Yeah. And here's what I mean by this. What do you warn? Because you look for, let's keep the language of a path, let's keep the language of walking and following. What do you warn? You warn people when you see paths and patterns. When you see paths and patterns that they should not be a part of. Right. That's it. Because you think about it, like an individual incident could be a bad day, I get it. Or it's like, let's take a very simple thing, attendance. Attendance at community group, attendance at church, attendance at DNA group. You'd be surprised how much attendance really tells you something, by the way. I'm being serious here. And so, it's like, something we miss, and we have vacation, we get sick, and we, medical people have crazy schedules, we all have crazy schedules, I get it. But when we gotta, I think, say something is when we begin to see a pattern in the path. And we say, well, look, you missed, I'm making this up, you missed 6 times in a row here. And let's talk about it, help me understand. And then you realize that it's this excuse, and this lame excuse, and this other lame excuse, and this reason. And then you lovingly say, hey, I want to let you know that this is a pattern in your life. This is a pattern and a path. And here's the great thing that here's the great lie people believe about patterns and paths. They think that it doesn't lead to the destination it's led everyone else to.
That's right.
It's like every time someone tells me they can date a non-Christian and it's all going to work out. I'm like, no, I've seen this path, and I see where I can actually have a view to see where it ends. And you're not the exception to the rule. It's a very dangerous thing to think. The rules do apply to you. And so what we want to have is, wouldn't it be amazing to have a leading, feeding, knowing, protecting ministry to one another, where you just, and here's what I think would happen. If we really had it, we'd hate it for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then we'd be like, I actually need this. I actually need you to help lead me. I need you to help feed me. I need you to actually know me in ways that I probably don't even want to be known. And I need you to warn me when you see me going out of line. This is what we do to people that we love. Finally, I want to read the last thing Jesus says here. Jesus always is not only thinking about the sheep inside of his church, but he's thinking about the sheep that don't yet believe. I want you to look at verse 16. He says this, and I have other sheep. I have other sheep in Buena Vista, and Boston Thurman, and West End, and Clemens. I have other sheep in Brooklyn. I have other sheep everywhere. And so here's what this means for us. This means that we are committed to reaching the sheep that are out there.
That's right.
That's what it means. 2 words to summarize how we try to do that here. Mobilization and multiplication. And I hope you guys appreciate that they both start with M and they end in Asian. That was not easy, okay? Mobilization and multiplication. Mobilization just says this. It's saying, hey, the number one temptation of a church is to collect. And we don't want to collect, we want to instead commission. And this is our heart. Let me give you an example. Brooklyn, New York. Okay, there's a friend of mine named Logan. He's planting a church in Brooklyn, New York called Park Slope Community Church. He's got 3 young kids. His wife is pregnant with their 4th. Just imagine that's your life. And then imagine you're going to move to Brooklyn, New York. And just imagine for a moment how expensive it is. It's so expensive. And just imagine you're going to do that with your 3 kids and you're one on the way. And you're going to figure out school and you're going to figure it all out. You're going to way downsize your house. Way downsize it. It's like, well, why would you do something like that? It's like, well, the answer that he would say is, well, I believe that Jesus Christ died for people in Brooklyn, New York. I believe there are sheep there. And a couple of months ago, and we'll say it again, is we challenged you guys. We said, what would you think about going to Brooklyn, New York? Are there some of you who all you need is a laptop in an airport and you could work from anywhere? Is there some of you who are going to graduate and you could do residency in New York, or you could go to grad school up there, or whatever? It's like, and we threw that out there. And it's funny, about 2 weeks ago, one of the guys who's been interested came up to me, and real sharp young man in our church, we'll probably tell you about it at some point. He came up to me and said, I signed the papers. I'm going to move with Logan. I'm going to help him plant this church in Brooklyn, New York. And I was incredibly excited, but I also had a feeling like, you sure? Because we can use you here too. That's kind of the temptation of all of us. Like, I'd like to keep you. I'd like to collect you. You're doing a really good job with everything here. And he's like, no, I really feel called, and we're excited. And the second thing is it's a commitment to multiply. What that means is we want to multiply groups and leaders and disciples and churches. And the great temptation is to get comfortable and say, well, I love my community. It's like, that's great. It may multiply because, not because we're trying to be mean and break up any community groups. It may multiply because Jesus has other sheep.
That's right.
Like, well, I love these service times, and it's like, well, it could change. And the heart behind that be, I have other sheep. What we do is that we want to reach people who are far from God but close to us. So what does all this mean? Let me read you one last passage where Jesus is called the Great Shepherd. In Hebrews 13:20, it says this. Now may the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus, the Great Shepherd. It's interesting. In his death, he's called the Good Shepherd. In his return, he's called the Chief Shepherd. In his resurrection, he's called the Great Shepherd. And here's what it says he'll do. He's the great shepherd of the sheep by the blood of the eternal covenant. That's the crosswork. He would equip you with everything good that you may do his will, working in us that which is pleasing in his sight through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. Here's what this means for us. 2 things. If you're in this room and you go, I'm not a Christian, I don't believe. One of the things we'd say is, would you commit to looking at the life and the ministry of Jesus? Jesus says what he wants us to do is take people his word and see if they hear his voice.
That's right.
That's what we do. Open Bible, open life, Bible conversations, all you're trying to do, all you need to do. Jesus is the shepherd. He has sheep. You need to show up. It's like, done. That's it. It's that simple. Jesus is the shepherd. He has sheep. You need to show up. You bring his word to people, and then see, do they hear his voice? Do they respond? For the rest of us, here's what I would say. Where do you need to lead, feed, know, and protect? Or maybe who do you need to lead, feed, know, and protect? Of course, you should probably start with yourself. And then start, with your family. Your family is the first flock. But what would it look like if we were just the type of church who cared for the sheep inside the fold and the sheep yet outside the fold who are not yet inside? We want to lead, feed, know, and protect each other in this church with an eye to say Jesus Christ has other sheep. Let's pray. Lord, you are the great shepherd. You are the chief shepherd. You are the good shepherd who lays down his life that you might take it up again. Lord, we thank you for doing the hardest work ever, dying for our sins in our place. Lord, we ask you to lead us. We ask you to feed us. We ask you would know us. We ask that you would protect us. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name.